Flight 927 was gliding smoothly across the Atlantic, cruising at 33,000 feet with the kind of steady calm that puts an entire cabin at ease. The soft dimmed lights cast a warm glow over drowsy passengers. Overhead bins were neatly shut, air vents whispered cool air, and the engine's low hum wrapped the airplane in a cocoon of serenity. In this peaceful atmosphere, seat 14A held a quiet, small 13-year-old girl, Alina. Her backpack lay by her feet, her blanket was folded neatly on her lap, and her headphones rested over her ears. She leaned slightly toward the window, watching the deep, blue sky stretch endlessly while white clouds drifted like slow-motion waves beneath the plane. Anyone who saw her assumed the same thing, just a quiet kid, just another passenger, nothing unusual. No one had the slightest idea that in a matter of minutes, this quiet girl would do something even trained adults could never imagine. 2 hours had passed since takeoff. Most passengers were asleep, some with eye masks on, some with books slipping from their hands. A businessman's laptop screen glowed faintly before he finally closed his eyes. Nearby, flight attendants whispered quietly in the galley, preparing for the next tea service. Alina, though young, carried an odd maturity in her posture. She wasn't asleep, she wasn't restless. She was listening, not to music, not to a podcast, but to patterns, vibrations, subtle shifts in the cabin noise that most people couldn't detect even if they tried. Her fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, matching the rhythm of something only she could hear. Then, out of nowhere, a single soft chime echoed through the cabin, the tone that usually signaled a routine announcement. Alina lifted one headphone slightly, curious. The captain's voice came on, but something was wrong. Very wrong, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. A pause followed, a long, unnatural pause. Cabin crew, please stand by. The words were simple, but the hesitation in his voice wasn't. Flight attendants froze mid-step. Passengers looked up, confused, and Alina, she felt her heartbeat skip. She had heard that tone before. Not on planes, but in recordings from her father's old military communication archives. It was the tone of a man trying to stay calm while something critical was happening. The PA system went silent. 2 attendants walked briskly toward the cockpit, their expressions tight, their posture rigid. They tried to appear calm for the passengers, but Alina could read the truth in their steps. They were worried. From behind the cockpit door came faint, muffled voices, urgent, fast, technical. Alina could only catch fragments, but even fragments were enough. Something wasn't right. She straightened in her seat, quietly removing her headphones. Then it happened. A sharp, distinct alert toned from the cockpit, one Alina recognized instantly from countless aviation documentaries and military tapes. A radar proximity alert. She inhaled sharply. This wasn't turbulence, this wasn't weather, this wasn't a mechanical glitch. There was only one reason this alert would trigger at cruising altitude: fast, approaching aircraft. She turned her head toward the window, narrowing her eyes as she scanned the sky below. For a moment she saw nothing. And then a faint metallic flash, too fast, too sharp, too angular. Another flash followed, her breath caught. Twin tails, a stealth, sharp nose, the unmistakable silhouette. F-22 Raptors, but why were they here? And why were they approaching a commercial airliner? The possibilities ran through her mind rapid. Fire, escort. Interception, miscommunication, a threat nearby. Whatever the reason, it wasn't ordinary. And to the hundreds of passengers around her, everything still looked normal. But to Alina, this was an unfolding crisis. Another PA announcement came on, but this time the captain's voice was strained. Cabin crew to the cockpit immediately. No welcoming tone, no explanation, just urgency. Passengers exchanged nervous glances. Alina tightened her grip on her blanket. Every instinct in her small body was on high alert now. Then the cabin phone, normally silent, began to ring loudly from the galley. One of the attendants answered, listened for 2 seconds, and her face drained of color. Alina didn't need to hear the words. She could read tension like other people read books. Something was approaching the aircraft, something fast, something military. A tiny crackle of sound came from a speaker near the galley, a sound so faint most people dismissed it. But to Alina it was unmistakable, a scrambled radio transmission. Copy approaching fast, identify immediately. Her pulse rushed. Military channel, encrypted frequency, urgent request for identification, which meant one thing. The F-22s had locked onto flight 927 and were demanding the captain respond. If he didn't, protocols would escalate, and fighter pilots never play guessing games with safety. Alina's mind went into analytical overdrive. Her father, a former military frequency analyst, had trained her to recognize encrypted patterns. She had spent years decoding scrambled audio for fun, so she knew exactly what was happening now. The captain wasn't reaching them, or the channel was mismatched, or the signal was bouncing. None of those were good in a situation like this. Alina exhaled slowly, her thoughts lined up with crystal clarity. They can't hear the captain, the comms are broken, they need someone who understands their channel. She unbuckled her seat belt. Passengers nearby glanced at her in confusion. Why was a small kid getting up now? But Alina didn't hesitate. She moved down the aisle with surprising determination, quiet but unwavering, like she had a purpose no one else understood. She reached the galley. A flight attendant turned sharply. "Oh, honey, you need to sit. I know the channel they're calling on," Alina said calmly. The attendant blinked. "What?" Alina pointed toward the faint speaker static. "They're calling us on a scrambled military frequency. I can hear it. You can't." The attendant stared, speechless. "There are 2 F-22 Raptors outside," Alina continued, voice low but steady. "They made a proximity call. Your captain didn't respond in time. They need identification, right now." How do you know that?" the attendant whispered. Alina lifted her chin slightly, not arrogant, just certain. "I grew up with military communication systems. I recognize their patterns." The attendant's expression shifted from disbelief to fear to something else. Hope. The cabin phone blinked with urgent frequency alerts. The channel indicator flickered, a sign that the cockpit and the jets weren't synchronizing. Alina looked at it. She didn't tremble, she didn't panic. She reached for the phone with steady, practiced fingers. She pressed a sequence of buttons, deducing the correct channel by the timing of the scrambled message she had heard earlier. The line clicked, a faint static hissed, and with the calm confidence of someone far older than 13, Alina spoke into the receiver. "Eagle Flight, this is civilian Shadow-6, state your intention." For a moment silence, absolute silence. The galley attendants stared, their hands over their mouths. And miles outside, flying dangerously close to the airliner, 2 F-22 Raptor pilots suddenly paused mid-communication. They had just heard a child's voice, not panicked, not confused, but clear, perfectly timed, and using their exact encrypted calling protocol. The kind of call only trained insiders know. The cabin of Flight 927 had been peaceful just moments ago, calm air, steady cruising, seatbelt signs off, passengers drifting in and out of sleep. But that calm evaporated the instant the captain's trembling voice hit the speakers. It began with a single chime. Ding! Every frequent flyer knew that sound, the signal for an announcement. But what they didn't know was that the man speaking behind the microphone wasn't calm. "Not anymore, ladies and gentlemen," the captain began, his voice betraying a slight shake. "We have 2 unknown aircraft approaching fast." Those words swept through the cabin like a sudden cold wind. Flight attendants paused mid-step. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman removed his earbuds, brows furrowing. The calm inside the aircraft tightened into something tense, brittle, electric. And in seat 14A, one girl slowly slid her headphones off. Alina, 13 years old, quiet, ordinary, or so everyone thought. Her expression changed the moment those words echoed through the speakers. While passengers exchanged confused looks, Alina's face went pale, then sharp, then completely focused. She knew something the others didn't. What the captain said wasn't just alarming. It was a code, a warning. A sign that something was happening outside, something no civilian aircraft should ever face at cruising altitude. Unknown aircraft, one man muttered, twisting in his seat to look out the window. What does that mean? A woman whispered. Probably just military training, someone tried to reassure, though their voice shook. The cabin crew walked faster than before, trying to smile, but failing. Their eyes told the truth. They were scared. Flight attendants exchanged hurried glances near the galley. He said unknown aircraft. Was that in the briefing? No, nothing like that. On the radar screens inside the cockpit, two bright green blips were closing in at alarming speed. Not slowly, not cautiously, fast, deliberately fast. Within seconds, the signatures sharpened. Fighter jets. High speed, close range. The captain had no choice but to warn the cabin, even if the warning was vague. When everyone else was panicking, Alina sat perfectly still. Her breath slowed, her eyes narrowed, her hands tightened around her headphones. She wasn't afraid, she was analyzing. Her mind began racing through possibilities, calculations, scenarios. Two jets approaching the flank, fast, no identification broadcast yet. That meant one thing: they were searching for the plane. Or intercepting, or responding to a possible signal distortion. A normal person would never know that. But Alina wasn't normal. She was an Air Force communications prodigy. Not officially, of course. She was too young for that. But growing up with a father who decoded encrypted audio for the military meant she absorbed the knowledge like oxygen. She had spent years listening to scrambled transmissions for fun. She could identify frequency bands by ear. She could tell the difference between a training pattern and a real alert. She could even read urgency through static like a second language. So when she heard the captain's voice tremble just slightly, she knew something outside was wrong, very wrong. A sudden vibration rolled through the aircraft, subtle but noticeable. Passengers gasped. A few clutched their armrests. What was that? Why did the plane shake? Are we changing altitude? Alina looked out the window. Her breath hitched. Through the endless field of clouds she saw it, a dark shape, slicing through the air with impossible precision. Then another, not commercial wings, not cargo planes. These were sharp, angular silhouettes built for combat and speed. Fighter jets. The sun glinted off the metal edges as the aircraft streaked across the plane's flank, barely visible but unmistakable. They were close, too close. Her pulse sped up, but not from fear. This was a familiar. This was what she had studied. This was what she understood better than anyone else on the plane. While chaos quietly simmered in the cabin, the cockpit was in full emergency mode. Still no radio reply. The captain asked, his voice tight. Negative. The first officer said, fingers flying across the controls. They aren't responding to standard ATC frequencies. Try emergency band. Already did nothing. Another alarm beeped. Radar proximity warning. The jets were locking in formation. God, the captain whispered, why aren't they identifying themselves? But Alina knew the truth even before the pilots did. Sometimes fighter jets didn't identify themselves until they confirmed a threat. Sometimes they needed the target, this plane, to communicate first. And sometimes when frequencies scrambled or shifted, they thought the plane wasn't responding at all. Which meant the jets were readying for the next step. The atmosphere inside the cabin grew suffocating. People whispered to each other, some prayed, some filmed out the windows with trembling hands, hoping to catch a glimpse. Nobody understood what was happening except Alina. Her fingers tapped nervously on her seatbelt buckle as she replayed what she heard earlier, unknown aircraft. Approaching fast, no comms confirmed yet. Her father's voice from years of training echoed in her mind. If a military jet approaches you and communication fails, they escalate. They don't wait, they act. What scared her wasn't the jets themselves. It was the silence between them. No communication, no hail, no identification request. That only happened when the signal mismatch was so bad that the jets couldn't hear the plane at all. meaning the civilian aircraft was, according to military rules, a potential threat unless someone on board could reach them. Someone who understood their frequency patterns, someone who could deduce the channel they were cycling through. Someone like her. Alina stood up. Passengers stared at her, a tiny 13-year-old girl calmly rising while everyone else shook with fear. A flight attendant rushed over gently. "Sweetheart, please sit down. It's not safe right now." But Alina didn't sit. "There are 2 fighter jets on our left side," she said quietly. "The attendant froze and the captain can't reach them," Alina continued. "They're calling on a scrambled military frequency. I heard part of it." The attendant blinked in confusion and fear. How do you know that?" Alina held up her headphones. "I recognize the pattern, the timing, the static burst. They're cycling through encrypted bands." "Child, how?" "I grew up decoding military communication," Alina said softly. "I can try the channel they're using." The attendant stared at her for a long moment, torn between disbelief and desperation. Then another cockpit alert blared, audible even through the cabin door. Time was running out. Whatever hesitation, the attendant had vanished instantly. Outside the window, the 2 jets moved closer, wings tilting in evaluation. Their formation tightened. Their speed decreased to match the airliner. Passengers gasped as one jet briefly dipped low enough for the cabin to see a flash of gray metal and the shadow of a helmet inside the cockpit. Alina felt her chest tighten. If the jets didn't get a response now, they would move to signaling mode. And signaling mode was one step before forced compliance, or worse. The cabin phone in the galley blinked urgently, a cycle of red lights that meant multiple frequencies were trying to connect. The attendant grabbed the phone and then looked at Alina. "Tell me what to press," she whispered. Alina slowly reached for the keypad, her fingers steady. She pressed a sequence only someone with deep communication knowledge could guess, aligning the timing of the scrambled message with the most likely channel used by fast, approaching tactical jets. The line clicked, static hissed softly, then silence. Alina lifted the phone closer to her lips. Her voice came out calm, smooth, perfectly measured. "Unknown aircraft, this is civilian aircraft Shadow-6. Do you read? The galley froze, the passengers froze." Even the engines seemed quieter. Her voice traveled out into the open sky at 33,000 feet. Miles away, the pilots inside the F-22s heard something they never expected. A young girl's voice, steady, accurate, speaking on their encrypted channel. Their hands hovered over their controls. Their eyes widened behind their visors. Because whoever she was, she wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what she was doing, and that alone was enough to make 2 of the world's most elite fighter pilots freeze midair. The cabin lights were dim, glowing softly over the sleeping passengers of Flight 927, cruising steadily at 33,000 feet. The engines hummed with a gentle rhythm, a floating lullaby above the endless spread of clouds. Most passengers were dozing, wrapped in blankets or lost in their movies. The world inside the plane was calm, almost silent, except for seat 14A. A quiet 13-year-old girl named Alina sat alone by the window, her headphones on, eyes fixed outside. She looked like any other quiet teenager, small frame, soft eyes, a notebook open on her tray table. She had been sketching clouds, writing random numbers and frequencies only she understood, and watching the horizon with a kind of focus no one noticed. To everyone around, she was just a child, shy, gentle, invisible, but her silence was not ordinary. It was engineered, because Alina wasn't simply quiet. She had been trained to listen, and what she heard next was something even the pilots didn't expect. Everything changed when a sharp crackle broke through the cockpit speakers. Captain Reynolds, a veteran pilot with 22 years of flying, froze. His first officer lifted his head instantly. The sound came again, a coded emergency ping, then the radar lit up. "Too fast. Moving aircraft were closing in on their left and right flanks incredibly fast, breaking through airspace with no prior communication. Captain Reynolds' hand trembled slightly as he turned on the cabin mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, pausing as another alert beeped. "We have two unknown aircraft approaching fast." Passengers stirred. Some straightened up, confused. Others gasped, fear spreading like a quiet wave. Flight attendants exchanged looks of panic as they tried to keep calm faces. In row 14, Alina didn't move at first. She simply blinked. Her eyes sharpened instantly. She pulled her headphones off. Something in the air felt wrong, very wrong. Alina closed her notebook and leaned forward, staring out the window. She saw it, a sleek metallic shadow slicing through the clouds, closer than any commercial aircraft should allow. Then a second one on the opposite side. Passengers whispered nervously, "Is that a jet? What is happening? Are we in danger?" The crew had no answers. But Alina did. Her father and everyone involved had kept it secret. At 13, she was already known by a codename in certain Air Force circles, Shadow-6, a communications prodigy, the youngest person to ever break and rebuild encrypted tactical frequencies. A mind designed for the sky, and now the sky was calling. Another alert sounded through the cabin, this time muffled but audible from the partially open cockpit door. "They're locking onto us," the co-pilot whispered urgently. "They want us to respond." Captain Reynolds tried, cycling through standard civilian frequencies. But the jets didn't reply, because they weren't listening to civilian channels. They were on military encrypted comms, impossible for commercial aircraft to access. "Why aren't they answering?" a flight attendant whispered. Alina stood up, because she knew exactly why. And she knew exactly what frequency they were using. The jets suddenly swooped closer, matching speed with terrifying precision. Their silhouettes became crystal clear, unmistakable. F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. Passengers screamed. The cabin shook lightly from the turbulence caused by their wings slicing so close. Alina didn't panic. She ran. Her small feet moved fast down the aisle, dodging bags, arms, a panicking businessman, a crying child. Her heartbeat was steady, her breathing calm. She moved as though she had trained her whole life for this moment. "Sweetie, wait," a flight attendant called out, startled, but Alina didn't stop. She reached the cabin phone, grabbed the receiver with both hands, and punched in a sequence of digits so fast the attendant froze. "Sweetie, you can't. I know their channel," she said quietly. The attendant's breath caught, because no normal child should know anything about that. But Alina wasn't normal. She pressed the final button, and the plane fell into complete silence. The voice that shook the SKY, a soft static buzz, filled the line. Alina's voice didn't tremble, it didn't waver, it was calm, direct, commanding. "Eagle Flight, this is civilian Shadow-6, state your intention." The cabin phone broadcast wasn't audible to the passengers, but she didn't care. She wanted the jets to hear her. And they did. 20 seconds of silence followed, then 30. The F-22s, whose pilots had been speaking to each other moments earlier, went completely radio dead. In the cockpit of the lead F-22, Captain Mason's eyes widened. His wingman, Lieutenant Cruz, stared at his console in shock. "Did a child just call us? On our encrypted channel? That's not possible." But another voice broke in their command center. "Eagle Flight, confirm identity of source Shadow-6. That codename is classified at Tier 1. Both pilots shivered. Because the last time that codename appeared, it was attached to a specialist who had rebuilt their entire communications infrastructure during a cyber attack exercise. And now that same codename had appeared on a commercial flight from a little girl. "Shadow-6, this is Eagle 1. The F-22 pilot finally responded, voice tense but respectful. Requesting authentication. Alina closed her eyes. She remembered her father's words. "If you ever need to prove yourself, use the Echo cipher." Only you and command will know it. She whispered a sequence, a series of tones, digits, and pauses tied to a classified Air Force comms protocol. Eagle One stiffened in his cockpit. "Oh my God, it's real," he said under his breath. Eagle Two swallowed hard. "That kid, she's Shadow-6." Alina spoke again, voice steady. "You approached a civilian aircraft without response." "Why?" Eagle One exhaled, almost embarrassed. "We detected an unregistered transponder spike from your tail section. We needed visual confirmation to ensure no hostile override was occurring." Alina's eyes sharpened. A transponder spike? That wasn't normal. Someone had tried something, spoofing, hacking, interference. She didn't know yet. But the jets weren't attacking. They were checking. Still, their approach had terrified the passengers. She had one job now, restore calm. "Eagle One," she said, "you have visual confirmation now. Maintain safe distance and shift to escort formation. I'll conduct internal diagnostics. You will." Eagle One hesitated. She was a child, but she was also the only one in the sky capable of speaking their language. "Affirmative, Shadow-6," he replied finally. "We copy and comply." The two F-22 Raptors immediately pulled back, falling into precise, symmetrical escort positions above and behind the aircraft. Passengers gasped again, this time in confused relief. "They're backing off. They're protecting us." They listened to someone, and the plane began to feel safe again. Because a 13-year-old girl had told two fighter jets what to do. The pilots finally see her inside F-22-1. Mason switched to a secure line, speaking softly. "Shadow-6, may we ask your age?" Alina sighed. "It's irrelevant," she replied. "Focus on the spike. I'm checking cabin signals now." Eagle 2 murmured to his leader. "She's definitely real. Real." Mason answered. "She's terrifying." Alina pressed the hold button on the cabin phone and walked straight to the cockpit, where the stunned captain let her in. She pointed at the transponder panel. "There, that reading. It's fluctuating every 8 seconds. Captain Reynolds blinked hard. "How did you?" "No time. Switch to manual pairing mode." He did. The irregular spike vanished instantly. Alina nodded. It was a false signal loop. Probably a hardware glitch, but it mimicked hijack spoofing. That's why they came. The captain stared at her as though she wasn't human. "You fixed it." Alina didn't look impressed with herself. "I just stopped a misunderstanding." The F-22s maintained escort for another 10 minutes, ensuring everything was stable. Then Eagle One spoke again. "Shadow-6, we will return to base. If you ever decide to join us formally, Command would welcome you." Alina's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Maybe someday," she said softly. "Eagle Flight signing off." The pilot replied, "Shadow-6, it was an honor." The jets tilted their wings in a silent salute, then blasted upward into the clouds, disappearing with a roar. The passengers watched with awe. Inside the cockpit, Captain Reynolds lowered himself slowly into his chair. "Alina, who are you?" She put the cabin phone back in its cradle. "Just a quiet passenger," she said gently. Then she walked back down the aisle to seat 14A, put her headphones on, and resumed looking out the window. As if nothing had happened, but every single person on that plane would remember her forever, the girl whose whisper froze two of the world's strongest fighter pilots. The girl who saved them with a voice steady enough to command the sky. The girl known only as cabin still hummed with nervous energy, the kind that lingers even after the danger has begun to fade. Flight 927 had stabilized, its engines steady again, its altitude balanced. But no one inside could truly relax, not while two F-22 Raptors still sliced through the sky beside them. Passengers pressed their faces to the windows, whispers racing through the aisles. "Are those real fighter jets? Why are they here? What's happening to our flight?" No one had an answer. Except the one person no one would have guessed, the smallest, quietest passenger on board, Alina. She stood at the cabin phone again, her small fingers steady on the receiver. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. If anything, she looked at home. The phone crackled with encrypted static, the kind only military personnel were ever trained to hear. The kind of sound that meant the next words mattered. Inside the lead F-22 cockpit, Lieutenant Commander Mason stared at his comms panel. The mysterious signal, the one that had disrupted their encrypted channel, had been reset. The transponder anomaly that brought them here was already corrected. And the voice on the other end, that voice, high, pitched but calm, young but controlled, a voice too precise, too perfectly aligned with military cadence to be accidental. But she had one last test to pass. Shadow-6, Mason said, formal now, for final identification, state end to end verification sequence pattern 3. The request was heavy. Pattern 3 was not routine, not basic, not even semi-classified, it was top tier. A level so secure only people with deep access inside the communications division knew it existed. His wingman, Lieutenant Cruz, turned his head sharply. "Did you just ask a child for pattern 3 verification?" Mason didn't reply. Because he didn't believe she could answer. No one on a commercial flight should even know what pattern 3 was. But there was no fear in Alina's eyes, no hesitation, no doubt. She had grown up with these codes. She had studied them, memorized them, internalized them. Her father had spent nights teaching her the architecture of encrypted military speech, turning it into something she understood better than most adults in uniform. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and spoke. Her voice flowed like it had been rehearsed 1,000 times. Verification, Shadow-6, Pattern 3, Sequence Delta 4, Echo 1, Kilo 9, Break Sierra 0, Tango 7, 0, Alpha 1, confirmed checksum. 3-7-3, she stopped, the frequency fell silent, not a sound, not even static. Every ear on the military frequency froze. Lieutenant Cruz's jaw dropped. "That's correct," he whispered. "Every digit, every pause, every checksum." Mason didn't move. For a moment he forgot he was flying a $150 million aircraft. He forgot the mission, the protocol, the sky. He was listening to the impossible. That sequence wasn't written anywhere. It wasn't printed. It wasn't stored. It wasn't transmitted. It was spoken, taught, passed down verbally only to trusted insiders. No civilian in the world should know it. And certainly no 13-year-old girl at 33,000 feet on a passenger plane. 2 full seconds of dead silence hung in the air. Then Mason finally spoke, his voice softer, carrying something rare. "Respect, Shadow-6, he said, breath catching slightly. "It's an honor flying with you." The words floated across the frequency like a salute. They echoed inside both aircraft. And even though no passenger heard them, the moment rippled across the entire plane. Because right after that sentence, the F-22s moved. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but gracefully, with precision only elite pilots could execute. They pulled out of their intimidating tight flank position and drifted into a clean escort formation. One jet rose slightly to a high cover angle. The other slid smoothly to a guard position behind the rear stabilizers. The movement was beautiful, almost scripted, almost ceremonial. Passengers gasped again. "They're protecting us." They backed off. Did the captain talk to them? What changed? No one noticed the quiet girl placing the cabin phone gently back into its cradle. No one noticed her small smile. No one knew she had just passed one of the highest level military verifications on record, except the pilots. Captain Reynolds watched the radar as the anomaly completely disappeared. The initial ping, the one that made Air Command think Flight 927 was in danger, had once again gone silent. "Stable, clean, it's gone," the co-pilot whispered. "Everything's normal again." "Of course it is," Captain Reynolds said absently, staring at Alina with a mixture of awe and confusion. "She found it, she fixed it." Alina simply nodded. "The spike wasn't malicious," she said calmly. "It mimicked a hijack signal pattern, but it wasn't one. It was a hardware glitch looping at 8-second intervals. The F-22s interpreted it as a possible override attempt." The captain blinked. "You speak like you trained for this." "I did," Alina said softly. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Some truths don't need an audience. For the next 15 minutes, the F-22 Raptors accompanied them. Not in silence, but in solidarity. Their wings occasionally dipped, signaling status up. Dates Alina read effortlessly. Behind her, passengers whispered, "Are we okay now? They're guiding us out of danger. This feels like a movie, but why did they come in the first place?" But the person with all the answers simply returned to her seat, put her headphones on, and closed her eyes. Outside her window the clouds thinned. Ahead the navigation map beeped softly. The danger was gone. The escorts had done their job. Alina had done hers. In the F-22 cockpit, Mason radioed one last time. "Shadow-6 safe zone achieved. You are clear of all concerns. We return to base." There was a pause. Then Alina lifted her headphones slightly, pressed the cabin phone receiver for a fraction of a second, and spoke the last words she would say on that channel. "Thank you, Eagle Flight. Fly safe." Mason smiled inside his oxygen mask. "You too, Shadow-6 out." The jets dipped their wings in a coordinated farewell. And then, like two metallic arrows shooting toward the sun, they broke formation and soared upward, climbing at impossible speed until they vanished into the blinding sky. The passengers never heard the codes. They never heard the military salute. They never heard the final goodbye. But they did notice something. The jets left. The tension lifted, and a strange, unexplainable calm settled inside the plane. People slowly sat back in their seats. A few wiped tears, a few prayed, a few laughed nervously. The flight attendants hugged each other quietly. Captain Reynolds finally spoke through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control. We are safe." Cheers broke out in the cabin. But amidst all the relief, only one truth spread clearly among them. Someone had done something extraordinary. Someone had saved their plane. Someone had spoken to the fighter jets. And the rumor began to whisper from row to row it was a girl. A little girl. She ran to the phone. I saw her. She wasn't scared. She talked to the jets. She saved us. But Alina didn't turn around. She didn't bask in the attention. She didn't wave. She didn't claim anything. She simply opened her sketchbook and doodled clouds again, as though she hadn't just prevented a military escalation at 33,000 feet. When Flight 927 landed safely, the cabin erupted in applause, but Alina was the first to leave, slipping quietly down the tunnel walkway with her small backpack. One flight attendant, the same one who had tried to stop her earlier, called after her, "Sweetie, what are you?" Alina paused, turning back with her soft, almost shy smile, the one that looked ordinary, gentle, harmless. "I'm just a quiet passenger," she said, and she walked away. But everyone knew better. Everyone knew the truth. Their plane had been saved by a girl who spoke like she commanded the sky. A girl with a voice strong enough to freeze two of the world's most advanced fighter pilots. A girl with a code name whispered with reverence.